In today's video, let's paint this cute Valentine's Day kitty together in the app Procreate. We're going to be using digital watercolor and I'll guide you through the process that I used. If you're interested, please keep on watching. Hello and welcome to Color with Kendi. On this channel, we paint digital watercolor and gouache in the app Procreate. For this video, I'm using a bunch of different supplies, and if you'd like to follow along with the same ones, you can find a link in the description as well as the pinned comment. Let's begin. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is open up the canvas that I'm using today. This has a nice paper texture. It's not too much because I don't want it to get in the way of the painting, so something quite light. And this is texture number 2 from the set that I'm using today. I'm just going to turn off this layer and then I'm going to tap right up at the top, and then I'm going to import the rough color map, the color palette, as well as the traceable. In order to do that, you just need to go to your wrench icon, this is your actions menu. Tap on Add and insert a file or insert a photo depending on where you've saved it. Okay, so we have the rough color map, and this is what I'm going to refer to from time to time. So this is something I usually do before I start painting. I do a rough color just so I know where everything needs to go. And you can refer to this as well while you're painting. And then we have, let me turn that off, then we have the color palette right there. And then we also have the traceable. So I'm going to be using this line art for now, and I might change it later on, but I'm going to keep the line art. Usually I reduce the opacity of the line art, but for today I'm going to keep the line art. So I'm just going to go to the paint here layer and make sure that the color palette is turned on, and we can start painting. So the first thing we're going to do is lay down the base colors. That is usually what I do for any painting, and then we can start to add on the details later. So I'm just going to zoom in and I'm going to press and hold with my finger to grab this color right here. You can pick any color of your choice as well. And then I'm going to tap on the brush library. I'm using the Amazing Watercolor Brush Pack today. And I'm going to start out with a relatively dilute brush, and then I'm going to layer on more colors. So this is a little bit different from how I've painted some of my previous paintings. So I'm going to start out with the soft watercolor segment. This is brush number 22. It's a dilute soft watercolor brush. And let me just show you this on the side. So it's very dilute, and depending on how much pressure I apply, I can get more pigment. And you can lift your pencil many times and add more pigment, and you don't need to worry about overlaps because this is meant to be a wet looking brush. I'm just lifting my pencil ever so slightly and laying down the pigment. I'm just going to continue and lay down the base colors for the cat. Like that. Then let's now lay down the pink. So let's grab this color right here, press and hold. And let's lay down a little bit of pink, very light pressure in the ears. And then I also want to do the cheeks a little bit here too. Let's start to paint in the hearts. Now because the hearts are smaller, I think I should go down in size, so I'm going to go to size 15. So I think all the pink is done. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this color right here, press and hold it. And then I'm just going to paint in the bow tie. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a highlight. So right now, as I said, only base colors. And for the shadow here. So for the shadow here, let's see. I want to use a warm gray, so I'm going to stay within the same hue that I'm on. So the hue is this ring that we have outside here. I'm going to stay where I was. I'm just going to move my color towards gray, but I'm going to keep a little bit of red mixed into it. So let's see. Yeah, that's the color. I'm just going to add that shadow in. Now, the You're Perfect, I feel like for that part, I would prefer a brush that has a little bit more definition. So you can continue with brush number 22, but I find it's a little bit too soft. I want it to have more definition. So in that case, it's probably better to choose a different brush. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to brush number 16. It's supposed to be a wet on dry brush. So it's like you're painting on dry paper. So it's not as soft. And I think this brush will work quite well. So what I'm going to do is just paint that in a different layer. And I'm going to go back to this color right here. So that's the color that I want to choose. And then let's see. I think that's too big, the brush size. So I'm gonna go down to size 7 and paint that in. Now, if size 7 is still too big for you, then you can go down a little bit more. Actually, yeah, I think maybe let's go down to size 2. Yeah, and use lighter pressure. And with this brush, when you lift your pencil and add more pigment, there will be a little bit of an overlap. So just keep that in mind, because this is supposed to mimic the wet on dry technique in watercolor. So if you do lift your pencil, there will be a little bit of overlap. So now the base layers are done, we can start to add more pigment. So we have the You're Perfect on a separate layer, and then we have our cat. So let's go back to that cat layer. Now, if you want to smudge anything out at this point, you can do that. So I'll show you how to do that. So just go to the smudge tool, and then I'm going to use smudger number 6. And I might smudge with the small size, size 5, a little bit of this area out. And see if there are any places where you want to smudge things a little bit. Oh, try not to over smudge. I'm going to smudge the cheeks ever so slightly so they kind of blend into the face a little bit, like that. So smudge everything you want at this point, and once you're happy with that, then we're ready for the next step, where we'll start to add a little bit more texture. So what I'm going to do is go to Layers panel, and where I have the cat, I'm just going to call this cat base layer, just so we remember what everything is. I usually don't name my layers, but I think it might be easier for you to understand what's happening. So we have our cat base layer. Let's tap on plus, and then let's make this a clipping mask. So I love to paint with clipping mask because that way, anything that I do in this clipping mask layer will only show up on the painted portion underneath. It won't go outside the bounds of it. So what I want to do is add a little bit more brown with varied texture. So I'm just going to grab this color right here, and then I'm going to go to one of my favorite brushes in the set, which is number 33, Hard Edge Overlay A. And what I'm going to do is, I'm on size 55, and I'm just going to maybe change the color a little bit so it's closer to orange. I feel like it wasn't, yeah, there we go. I don't know if you can see this. Do you see? It's starting to add a little bit of color variation. So let me show you off to the side in another layer what this brush looks like. So this brush, with light pressure, it looks like this. And if I use heavier pressure, you'll get a lot more pigment and harder edges. But if I keep the pencil on the screen and then start to lighten my pressure, you can erase away a little bit of that. And you can vary your pressure to get interesting results like that. So that's essentially how the brush works. And what I'm going to do is now I'm just going to delete that layer. I'm going to go back to the layer underneath. And now what I'm going to do is just add a hint of color variation to this cat. So okay, I like that. I like that amount of color variation. And you can continue to add more colors as well if you'd like. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the color. I'm going to go back to this color that we had, and then go to the color menu and make this a little bit darker. And I'm going to add that color variation to the hearts. Okay, so I'm happy with the color variation that I've added to this, and I will add a little bit more. But before I do that, I want to paint in the background. I think it's far easier to add your details and get a sense of what your final painting will look like if you add in the background at this stage. And for the background, I'm going to use a very pale pink color. So I'm just going to grab this color right here. And then I'm going to go back to that brush that we used to add that color variation, brush 33. And I'm going to use this with varied pressure. Actually, maybe this is a bit too big, size 55. I'm going to make a background around the cat, trying to avoid getting too close to the cat. It's okay if I get close to the hearts, but I'm trying to avoid the cat. And I'm not lifting my pencil. I'm keeping my pencil on the screen. So there, our background is done. So it's a little bit of a messy background, which I like. And now I want those hearts to pop a little bit right now, I feel, because We have the background, which is pink, and the hearts are also pink. Kind of hard to see them. So what I'm going to do is create a little bit of a white outline outside of those hearts. So you know how we have a little bit of that white outline around the cat and it's popping more? Let's do that around the hearts. So in order to do that, I'm just going to go to the eraser tool and I'm going to go with eraser 5. I'm going to go with size 25 and I'm just going to create sort of an outline around these hearts and kind of fill it in too. Just going to erase away. So I'm basically erasing a part of the background and that way the hearts will pop a little bit more. Yeah, I think that looks good. It pops a lot more. So now what I want to do is start to add a little bit more color and a little bit more contrast. So I'm going to do that to the hearts first. So what I will do is I will go above that clipping mask layer. I'm just going to rename this to clipping mask so we remember what it was. So right above the clipping mask, add a new layer. And I'm going to add more color to these hearts, but I'm going to do this with a different brush. I'm going to do this with a drier brush so that it has a little bit of texture. So I'm going to go to the brush library and I'm going to use brush number 11, dark outline B. And I'm going to grab this color right here, press and hold. I'm going to make it a little bit darker by going down at a diagonal in the colors menu. Let's test this out. Yeah, I like that color. So I'm going to rename this to Hearts Details. So what I'm going to do is just on one side of the heart, add a little bit of color. So once we've added that in, now let's go to the smudge tool, smudger number 6, and I am on size 5. Just going to gently smudge out some areas, not the entire thing. If I smudged, so for example, for this heart, if I smudged everything out, it would look like that. That's a nice look, but I actually want it to retain a bit more texture. So I'm just going to do gentle tapping. I'm not going to smudge everything out. Now what I want to do is I also want the bow to pop a little bit more. So I'm going to use the same color that I have here, and I'm going to go to another layer and then call this bow details. And I'm going to use that same brush. Brush number 11, this is not a soft looking brush, it is more defined. So I'm going to use this one and I'm going to create a few lines like this, very thick lines, wherever you would see more darkness. Okay, so it looks really messy, but if you zoom out, not bad, but let's use the smudger. So let's go to the smudge tool and gently, ever so slightly, smudge some of that out. Now the other thing I wanted to do before I start working on the details for the cat was to change the line art color. And right now the line art is black. I want to make it brown. So one way to do this is to add a clipping mask. So I'm going to tap on plus and tap on that layer, making a clipping mask. And then what I'm going to do is take the color, that brown color from the colors menu, I'm going to tap on it, drag, and drop. Okay, so now that I'm happy with that, let's move on to adding more details to the cat. So I'm going to do this with a different brush that we haven't used yet. I'm going to use this one, brush number 24. It's a dry saturation shift flat brush. So let me show you how that works on the side. So I'm going to grab this color right here. This is our last color in the palette. We'll grab and hold. And I'm just going to zoom in here. So if I use light pressure, that's what the brush looks like. Medium, heavy. So it's quite nice when you're using light pressure because it creates this sort of a look. And that's what I want for the stripes. I don't want to paint them in so that they're very defined. I want them to feel a little bit light. So what I'm going to do is use this brush with very light pressure so that the strokes look a little bit dry in certain areas. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that brush that we used earlier, which was number 11, the dark outline B, and I want to add in the cheeks as well as a little bit more definition to the ears. A little bit in the ear area. So I'm just going to add a little bit of darkness. And then I'm also going to add a little bit of this color here because it would be in shadow, so it would be a bit darker. So as you can tell, this is really messy, but I'm just adding in some color. And what I'm going to do is now smudge it out, but I'm not going to smudge it out so that it's perfectly blended. So let's see, before I move on, I'm thinking maybe we can make the watercolor paper texture a bit more apparent. Right now you can definitely see it, but I feel like it's not very strong. I want to make it a little bit stronger, so this is a good time to do it before we do our final details. So if you go to the layers panel and then you tap on texture overlay and you open up that group by tapping right there, there are a bunch of different layers in this group. If you want your texture, your paper texture, to look a little bit more intense, let me just zoom in so you can really see what we're doing. You can go to that paper texture layer that we have right there. It's the second one, so the bottom one and then the one above it. Tap on CB and let's increase the opacity a little bit more. Let's make it around 75. So as you can tell, that has made our paper texture a bit more apparent. Let's go back to fur details and let's add in the fur details. So let's go to the detail brushes. So for details, I always like to use the detail brushes because they were designed to be used at a smaller size. The other brushes don't always go down to a very small size. So let me show you this off to the side. So make sure I'm right there. So that's what that brush looks like if you use light pressure. If you use heavy pressure, the line is much thicker and it doesn't have that much texture. And the trick really is to vary the pressure. So maybe I'll pick a lighter color somewhere. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's good. So what I want to do is just in certain areas, add a few lines like that, just to indicate fur. Okay, so I think I am done. I could add more details. For example, I could add more details to the ears, but I think I'm going to stop right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that traceable. Actually, no, I don't want to remove the traceable because if I remove the traceable, I'll remove the line art. But here's what it looks like without the traceable. You could actually add your own line art at this point. It's got this nice, interesting vibe, but I will need to keep the traceable. So usually I remove the traceable at the very end of my paintings, but for this one I have to keep it. And I'm going to remove the color palette. There we go. So yeah, we are done. Let's have a look at what we created together. So we used a bunch of different techniques for this. We used some dry brushes, some wet brushes, some texture brushes. And I'm quite happy with how it turned out. Very cute, isn't he adorable? So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned a few new techniques. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comment box below and I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful time creating. Bye!